All right, good evening. We'll get started. It's 6 p.m. in Perth time and 8 o'clock in Brisbane, 9 o'clock in the Eastern States. So thank you for joining us. Tonight's national webinar is on the Australian rental market. Really important that we bring you good education on what's happening around the market as far as rents are concerned. Very excited to bring you two of the best property managers around the country. So we have Jamie Horner that will be joining us. She's based in Perth. You can see her, I think, on the video at the moment. So good evening, and also Samara Bedwell from Brisbane. Great to have two of the best property managers in Australia on with us. Okay, so just before we get going, my name is Garth Davis. I'm the founder and CEO of Property Powerhouse, and we wanted to welcome you to this 30-minute webinar this evening. We know we're quite tight for time, but we wanted to make it really full of good information and not drag things out for you. So that's my role. I'm the CEO with the business, and what Property Powerhouse does is we help mum and dad investors buy investment properties around the country. What we do is help guide them and educate them through all the processes of where to buy, how to buy, help them with the finance, help them with cash flow estimates, help them with the settling of the property, have these excellent property managers look after your properties, help with depreciation schedules, help with insurances, and basically hold their hand the whole way through the process. So we're very keen on our education, so we run education events live, face-to-face, as well as the webinar. So that's a bit of a background on what we do at Property Powerhouse. I'm going to get cracking onto the webinar. Let's have a look at the next slide if she behaves for me. Right, let's have a look. That's nice. Can't get her to move the next slide. I'm going to talk about Darwin, Melbourne, and Sydney. There we go. And let Samara and Jamie talk about the other capital cities that they are specialists in. So what's happening in Darwin? So this data in front of us here is care of CoreLogic. I'm sorry, it's a little bit blurry, but this is CoreLogic, who are like the Bible for residential real estate transactions around the country, independent third party. I'm going to talk to you about Darwin here. So you can see the numbers here on the left are a rental yield in 2018. The numbers to the right are 2019. Basically, how you get to a rental yield is you get the weekly rent, you multiply that by 52 weeks, then you divide it by the value of the property, and you multiply it by 100. Now, what that means in short is a rule of thumb: if a property is worth $500,000 and it rents at $500 a week, it'll have a 5.2% rental yield. So dollar for dollar is about 5.2. Okay, so what's happening in Darwin? So Darwin was a rental yield of 5.8% last year. You can see comparatively that's a very high figure, and they've actually grown to 6% in the 2019. What's happening up there is there's a very strong rental demand, especially for homes. There's a little bit of a oversupply of apartments. So as far as apartments are concerned, not too much pressure on the rentals, but when it comes to the homes, there's very much a strong demand, rents going up, and particularly with the 4-bedroom home. So if you own a 4-bedroom home up in Darwin, it's a landlord's market. You're getting good rent and can push rents up. Let's have a next look at Melbourne. So Melbourne and Sydney, you can see, are coming off lower bases. So Melbourne's rental yield is 3.3% last year to 3.5% this year. What's happening is vacancy rates are actually very low there. Rents are going up in Melbourne. Large numbers of people are arriving at property rental opens, and even areas outside in the secondary cities in Victoria, like Bendigo. Bendigo has a vacancy rate of below 1%. So things are going well from a rental perspective in Melbourne. In the Sydney market, you can see that they also came off a low base last year, 3.2% as a rental yield. And they've maintained their rental yield at 3.2% this year. So what's actually going on there? It's actually a renter's market there at the moment. The rental market is a bit soft. This is a result of quite a lot of supply coming on stream, particularly in the way of apartments. So demand has also been a bit subdued because as property prices have dropped until recently, they dropped for about 18 months, and that enabled first home buyers to get confident and to get back into the market. So people that were renting have started to buy properties. And also there was, so demand for rental went down, and also there was a good supply of properties coming on the market. So naturally that's what happened there. So, all right, that's enough from me. I'm going to now pass you over to Jamie. So Jamie Horner is the principal and of Empire Property Management. Jamie has been in the property management industry for over 21 years and is the licensee of the award-winning team at Empire Estate Agents. The team at Empire have been managing the needs of thousands of investors for over 16 years. One of the key components in investing in property is the management of the home during the holding period, and the team at Empire focus on strategies to ensure your property investment keeps working for you. Good evening, Jamie.
Good evening, Garth. Hi, everyone. How are you? Oh, sorry, thought you were muted. I'm tonight going to talk about the rental market in Perth. I'm going to get straight into it to say that we've probably come off a pretty bad 4 years, probably one of the worst that we've had since 1996. So in relation to Perth, I always like to look at it in two ways. I'll give you the stats of where we're up to in relation to vacancy rate and those sort of things. But Perth almost has two tiers of market. So we have a market that's applicable to homes, and then there's a market that's applicable to apartments. And we can also say the same for a market that's applicable to the CBD and the area that's out of it. So 2014, 15, 16 and 17, we had more than 13,000 properties available in Perth. If we want to talk equilibrium, we probably want about 6,000 properties available in Perth for there to be a nice supply meets demand and rents going up that $10 to $20 per week. Those 13,000 properties, though, got absorbed very quickly from mid-2017 all the way to 2018. So during that 18-month period, we absorbed about 6,000 to 7,000 rental properties within an 18-month period. And the reason is not because we had increased demand, but supply decreased. So a lot of people were holding off developments or buying property for investment purposes, given the way the market was. So in about an 18-month period, so if we have a look at the graph that we've got in front of us today, we absorbed 6,000 to 7,000 number of properties. The equilibrium vacancy rate that you want to have a nice supply meets demand is 3.2% in Perth. Anything less than that, and it is back to an owner's market. So when you can see us being at 2.9%, it is actually back to having quite a few multiple applications and rent going back up again. However, when you look at the 2.9%, you've actually got homes in the Perth metropolitan area probably under 1%, and apartments in the CBD area around that 4 to 5%. So the average vacancy rate at the moment is 2.9, but it's actually quite skewed between two polar opposites. Apartments in the Perth CBD area, which are probably not performing very well and actually make up about, so if you look today, if we've got 6,200 available rentals, about 2,000 of those, so we're looking at what a good 25% of those are apartments in the CBD area, and they have a vacancy rate of about 5%. Whereas a home in the metropolitan area at the moment probably has a vacancy rate of 1 to 2%. So that 2.9% figure is skewed because it's balancing the two figures. We tend to manage properties that are homes are outside that metropolitan area, and our vacancy rate at the moment is probably under 1%. Multiple applications on properties and quite a good demand. So when we're looking at apartments versus cities. If we have a look at the map here, this came out late 2017. So when we look at the dark green items, they were buildings under construction. And I could probably tell you that most of them, when I look at them now, are done. The light green were buildings that had gone under DA approval, and a lot of them have now started construction. And the blue was the proposed. When you look at that map of the city of Perth, the supply there is probably another at least. A majority of those buildings are not commercial buildings. A majority of those are residential or hotels. And you're probably looking that if everything there in green, which dark green has probably already been constructed, the Elizabeth Quay ones have definitely been done, as well as the light green, which are under construction, then they're going to add about another 2,000 to 3,000 apartments to the market. So that market that we're looking at, when we're looking at vacancy rate, I always say to owners that vacancy rate, if we could break it down to a suburb or we could break it down to an apartment or a home, it would actually be much different. So Garth, I'll get you to skip through to the next slide. So when we're looking in Perth, this is REWA's stats, and again, they don't differentiate between, you know, what part of this is apartments and what part of the vacancy rate is homes. But what you can see is that we have a very similar number of houses to apartments or units on the market for rent. Generally, it has stayed well at about 6,200, which is actually under equilibrium. So actually supply is a little bit low at the moment compared to demand. But if you look at those top suburbs for lease properties, you might say, well, they're the ones that I want to be in. They're not actually. They're the ones that actually have the oversupply. So those properties are the ones that are constantly on the market. So if you can see their top suburbs, East Perth, 218, a majority of those are apartments. Perth, 209, South Perth, West Perth. If we could actually take those 2,000 apartments off our numbers and our vacancy rate would be extremely low. So housing prices have definitely moved up. The housing price median rent is now back up to 360, whereas apartment median rent has actually remained the same. So housing market is definitely on the way up in relation to rent and vacancy rate, and the apartment market is still stagnant and probably will continue to be for another 1 or 2 given all the new development we've got. So if I was looking at properties to buy in Perth, I still think that the rules are pretty common in relation to most states, but for Perth, you don't want to be in the CBD, but you want to be near the CBD. We have a love of waterways, so you're going to want to be near the ocean and the river. If you're looking at the ratio of not only the number of owners that are in your building, but in the suburbs around you, you ideally want a ratio of 70% owners to 30% investors. If you can actually go into a suburb that has a higher number of owners, so 90%, even better. So the higher number of owner occupiers are better for you in the suburb as well. You want cultural and lifestyle attractions. So for us, a lot of things do still happen around the Perth CBD. We haven't, like Brisbane, created these other satellite cities that are as prominent. We've tried. So we've got Rockingham, we've got Mandurah, we've got Midland, we've got all those sort of areas, but everyone is still technically drawn in Perth to being around the ocean, the water, or the CBD area. Security and safety, again, is a key component. The next one's interesting, pet potential. So currently last stats say that anywhere from 67 to 72% of the population have a pet. So it's a large number to outrule if you decide that you buy into a complex that has no pets. The one area in Perth that has bucked all trends, so in other words, suburbs that have had huge growth even over the last 4 years that we've had, is proximity to education. So we do extremely value primary schools or high schools that fall into certain catchments for public schooling. Those suburbs actually have totally bucked the trend and gone up in value. And then we've still got the proximity to arteries, roads and transport. So we're a very car dependent city. So we still like to know that we're close to the freeway, close to the airport and those sort of areas. And then with all owners, I always say check adjacent or nearby planned development. So if you were going to buy an apartment close to the Perth CBD, you do have to then look at the development plans, very similar to the map that I showed you, to see, well, what else are you competing with? In Perth, we have the Burswood complex at Crown, which is absolutely fantastic. We have Optus Stadium right next to it, but we also have at least 3,000 apartments available for rent in that Burswood Rivervale area, and many still under construction. So they're the key items that I think that you need to look at. But my areas that I keep talking to investors about, if they're overseas or they're interstate, is being outside that CBD area, looking at having a home, and where possible, try the North Metropolitan area between the freeway and the beaches, or the South Metropolitan area between the freeway and the beaches. And thank you. That's it.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Jamie. And there's some contact details there for Jamie on there, and I will make sure that there's an email address. A couple of questions have come through for you, Jamie, before we go across to Samara. So one of the questions came through. We've got one of the attendees this evening. They wanted to know your thoughts on a suburb called Duncraig. I think that's about 17 to 18 kilometres north of the CBD. Could be a little bit closer to the city. They're looking to potentially either buy an apartment there around about 480,000, and they've got an estimated rent of, it's a villa, beg your pardon. It's a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom villa, about 480,000, renting at about 420 to 440 a week. And also there's a townhouse there, 549,000, renting at $500 a week. What's the rental demand like in Duncraig? And a townhouse or villa, would they be a good thing to buy there?
It's quite high. We actually don't have much stock in Duncraig, because you'd probably find that 95% of the owners in Duncraig are a home on a block and are owner occupiers. So a lot of people want to live in that area. So they want to live around Duncraig, Karrinyup, all those sort of areas, but we don't get much supply, which makes them in high demand. I think the last time we had a property in Kingsley, which is right next to Duncraig, we had about 36 people attend and about 7 applications. And that's quite recently. So again, most Duncraig has allowed development, which means you're going to have a small number of apartments, but it probably hits that perfect ratio in relation to schooling, suburban area, close to beach, close to freeway, close to the metro area, and lots of owner occupiers surrounding.
Excellent. Excellent. So Duncraig gets the thumbs up from you. One of the other people listening in tonight, what are they saying here? They are looking at a low-rise complex in Melville at 2 levels. They're looking at a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom apartment. So Melville is 11 kilometers from the CBD, between Perth and Fremantle. So a good location, 11 k's from the CBD. Priced at around 550,000 and renting about $480 to $500 a week. What are your thoughts on Melville and how they're traveling in the current market?
So Melville sits in probably one of the most affluent areas in Perth. We have our western suburbs, and then south of the river you have Applecross, which is what Melville sits right next to. So again, another prime one, because it sits on the water and it also sits close to the beach along Canning Highway. Is that an apartment or a villa, Garth?
Sorry, so the
Melville one?
Melville, it's a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom, got Swan River views and city views.
Okay, so my suggestion with that one would be probably like the Duncraig one a little bit more. However, with the Melville one, fantastic location. I would say fantastic amenities and surrounds. And again, you're surrounded by a high occupier level. There are some new apartments in that area, but they are actually probably about 2 or 3 suburbs away. So with that yield, it's a good return.
Fantastic. All right. Well, we'll also be able to answer any other questions that come through. So thank you very much, Jamie. And if you're happy to mute yourself.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Now I'll go on to Samara Bedwell, and we'll get her to unmute herself there. She is the Director of Macwell Property Management. And let me move your slide down. We're going there. There we go. And Samara is Managing Director of Macwell Property Management that she started in 2015. She has 18 years experience in the industry, and during her career, she has won many national and state industry awards. In 2001, Samara left her home in the country to train and work in Brisbane as a property management assistant for Rain & Horne. Young and ambitious, she flourished in the big smoke, and within 12 months, she was the senior property manager of the department, generating massive growth and consistently winning industry awards. In 2010, Samara moved on to establish and manage the property management department for a major builder developer from the ground up, gaining valuable people management skills and strong business acumen. She is known for exceeding expectations in customer service and believes in employing staff with a positive, hardworking attitude. So good evening, Samara, one of our best property managers in the country and probably the best in Brisbane and Gold Coast. So good evening to you.
Hi, Gar. Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. Let's see if I can shed some light on the Brisbane market for you. And actually, before I came in here this evening, was just watching a little bit on the news, and Queensland, or Brisbane, is still one of the most affordable suburbs, capital city, sorry, in the country. So the stats that I've got for you tonight are sourced from the REIQ Market Monitor. These are based from the June quarter, so that's how they provide them out to us. So we keep a good eye on those for our investors. So the annual performance, capital city annual price growth for the 12 months to May 2019, we saw Brisbane at 2.7%. So we're faring okay. Sydney remained the most expensive city to live, as we all know that. So we'll move on to the next slide. So the top performers year on year for Queensland have been Sunshine Coast, Noosa and Fraser Coast. These three areas are really lifestyle suburbs. So they're all coastal, beautiful destinations, and predominantly what we're seeing is, you know, a lot of people move there. They're not necessarily investing there, but they might retire there, or they'll invest there ready for retirement. Based on this, we're going to have a look at unemployment rates. So we know across the board nationally, we've got an average of 5.2%. What you'll see in Brisbane is that we break it down into the councils. So we've got Ipswich Council area at 6.9%, Logan at 8% unemployment, and the Moreton Bay area at 9% unemployment. And why I've included those is these will show relevance to some of the returns, vacancy and demographics of the things that we'll be talking about. Despite you know, the low interest rates at the moment, unfortunately, property price sales have dried up a little bit. Unfortunately, we've seen that dry up with the Royal Commission, lending got tight, etc. So let's have a look at vacancy rates. The Gold Coast is performing quite well, and it's actually hit at 2.8%. This is putting it now in the healthy range, and this is the first time it's been in this healthy range in the last 10 years. So it's good to see the Gold Coast making a comeback. Brisbane was at 2.8%, Ipswich at 2.9%, Logan at 2.9%, the Moreton Bay Council area at 1.9%, and the Redland City area at 1.6%. So we still know, a little bit like Jamie was saying, you can break it down into housing market or unit market. Despite the stimulation for apartment living amongst the Queenslanders, it is still a clear preference that people want single dwellings, so that house and land is predominantly what people are chasing here. Okay. So median house sale prices per location. So if you're looking to purchase, you're probably going to be looking in around that greater Brisbane area of spending around that $530,000. Brisbane itself, $680,000. Ipswich median prices are $350,000, Logan $395,000, Moreton Bay $450,000, Redlands around the $530,000 as well, and the Gold Coast you're looking at anywhere around that median price of $622,000. So gone are the days, I believe, where you can hold property for 10 years and double your price. That would be lovely, but that's not happening in any markets across the country. In the last 12 months, what we saw here was Moreton Bay had the most turnover of property, followed by Logan. However, what we do know is that the turnover of property is down by an average of 40% on this time last year. Owners are now holding their property across Australia for about 14 years. That's up 4 years. From 2010, they were holding it for 10 years. So Brisbane is actually Brisbaneites are holding their properties for an average of 12.14 years before trading in, selling on. What we then have is our rental trends. So based on 3 to 4 bedroom houses, the average rents per week in Brisbane are $430 per week. So we're yielding about a 3.4% there, which isn't great. A lot to do with that is the oversupply of property, more so the unit market. So that's what's pushing that average down. Ipswich averaged $315 per week and is yielding about 4.7%, which is reasonable. We'd like it to be higher, but it's okay. Logan averaged $350 per week, yielding 4.8. Moreton Bay averaged $370 per week, yielding 4.3. And the Redlands City, with paying an average of $400 per week rent, yielding about 4% there as well.
Samara, just a quick question for some of the people that don't live in Brisbane.
Yep.
Main locations, basically maybe obviously Brisbane's the CBD. Explain to us north, west, south, east, where are these other main council areas? Yeah, sure. So Ipswich is our western suburbs.
Logan is southern, so between Brisbane and the Gold Coast. The Moreton Bay is our northern side of the city, and our Redlands is our southeast corridor. So that's Cleveland, Thornlands, Ormiston, those nice bayside suburbs. So what I would be suggesting based on the trends in Queensland at the moment, Garth and guys, is that we probably should be steering away from the zero lot line or the high density areas, because we do have an oversupply of them. Dual keys, we know, are fantastic opportunities usually to get greater returns, but most of our councils here are bucking at the dual key opportunities. They're more pushing for those small lots or apartment townhouse stock, because obviously it generates a greater rate capacity for them. What we know is not all areas are suiting that type of dwelling, and we know that the preferred stock is house and land. Prices in the affordable range are found where there are higher unemployment rates. So you're going to have a lower rental demographic. So whilst it might be cheaper to buy into, you may struggle to get a decent quality of tenant. I would always encourage my buyers to invest in the infill estates, so established suburbs with small parcels of land becoming available, maybe 30 to 50 properties, if that, is going to then sell to maybe 70% owner-occupier, 30% investors. It'll have greater resale for you. A little bit of an overview here, and I have got the old property clock, but there is some great news here that we are actually in a state of recovery right now. So that is really, really good. We are we still are the most affordable state in the country. The Redlands area, its average yield is about that 4%, but we do seem to have the best economy of scale here because we do have low unemployment rates. We're on the water, which, like Perth, like Jamie said, people sort of like to get around those lifestyle hubs, but those convenient locations as well. There are some great house and land opportunities in the marketplace. We've just got to make sure that we're getting the right land component, seeking out, the 70-30 mark here in Brisbane as well. The Gold Coast is a performing market at the moment. It can still be volatile. And what we've got to understand about the Gold Coast is that it's a tourist destination. It's not a business centre. It's not like the Brisbane City. So Brisbane City seems to outperform the Gold Coast most of the time because of the employment opportunities that the Gold Coast yet to deliver. But we are pleased to announce that vacancies are firming up across the board.
Mute myself. All right, that's fantastic. Thank you very much, Samara. Okay, a couple of questions that have come through. So people were asking about those infill areas that you recommended. So the good thing is with Property Powerhouse, we do work with our builders where we like 70% owner-occupier and only a small amount of investment product. Now, one of the people asking tonight, they're asking, this is, I think, about 25 k's north of Brisbane. In the suburbs, they're all adjoining. They're looking in Dacabin, Strathpine, and Griffin, I think all within about 25 k's north. They're looking to buy in an infill estate there around about 480,000. Their rent have been estimated at 440 to 460. They mentioned it will be a 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom home. What do you think of the suburbs of Dacabin, Strathpine, and Griffin? And I just have one other question after this.
Yeah, so they're good performing suburbs, and because what we're seeing heading to those northern suburbs is the infrastructure, the train lines, the Costco's, they're becoming their own little epicentre within themselves, North Lakes. There's so much going on out there. So they've got definitely a desired prospective tenants list waiting to go in out there. We've just got to be careful that we make sure that where we are going in those suburbs is more owner occupier than investor, because we don't want that oversupply to then reduce the rental price that we can achieve out there.
Okay. The other question is here, somebody's looking on the southern area, also I think an infill area. They talk about a suburb, Park Ridge, between Brisbane and the Gold Coast. Looking to buy a 4x2 there, about 450,000, given rents of 410 to 440. What do you think of that area, Park Ridge? And how many kilometers is that? About 28 kilometers, 30 kilometers from Brisbane CBD?
It would be around that 30 kilometres from Brisbane CBD. It's very central to both the Gold Coast and Brisbane. It's in the Logan corridor, so there has been quite substantial development around that Logan area. But what we found with Park Ridge is that the way in which that area is being developed is achieving greater returns and having high expectations than a lot of the suburbs around it. So I've got a really good story actually that we did last week. We've got a rental, probably while I check my board, that it was built by a builder, Villa World. It's addressed 20 Brunner Street Drive at Park Ridge. It hasn't yet settled. It settles on the 14th, and we've had it marketed for 2 weeks. Now, we have had 24 applications on that one property. We secured the tenants ready to move in, ready for settlement at 410. We could have sold pies and hot dogs at the open homes, which we haven't been able to do. That, you know, we've had 5, 6, 7 groups of people come through homes, sometimes 2, but you know, this was a high demand area. So Park Ridge, it's got very good demand and a very good calibre of tenancies coming through.
Excellent. Well, thank you. That's our time now. We've done it when I've done our job, but fantastic information. You guys are a wealth of information. As you can see, what we highly recommend is I will give you the contact details for Jamie and Samara. Jamie for WA, Samara for Southeast Queensland. Really important to we work very closely with property managers around the country to make sure that what the properties that we are selecting for our clients and presenting have gone through all the checks and balances with the property managers. It doesn't matter what the property is or where it is. If it can't rent, or the property managers say to us they don't like the quality of tenants in an area and we foresee issues, then these are all the checks and balances that we go through to make sure that we reduce the rental times while it's sitting vacant, and we leave these experts to do their job, because we want them to look after the tenant, look after the property. And I've got big reps on both these people, and we work extremely closely. We've got a really good relationship, and we do have some special arrangements for our property powerhouse clients with Empire in Perth, and also with Macquarie Property in Brisbane and the Gold Coast. So a big thank you again to Jamie and Samara. I will be sending out if you happen to join a little bit late, I will be emailing out the video of this. Hope you've enjoyed it. We plan to have another educational webinar in about a month's time. So please, when I do email you, come back to us with some suggestions of topics of what you'd like covered. So thank you very much again, and thank you for being on the show. Thank you. Thanks, Jamie. Thanks, Samara.